This is the fourth video in the series on human evolution. The theme is that evolution has speeded up dramatically, especially as it applies to human beings. Natural selection operates on genetic differences within a population, which occur due to random mutations. The more quickly the environment changes, the more selective pressure there is, favoring some traits over others. Hence, the more quickly organisms will evolve. We humans have been changing our own environment at an ever-increasing rate and have forced our own evolution. Our conceit has been that human beings are the end product of evolution. This was consistent with the Bible, the fact that humans were smarter than other animals, and the worldwide domination of European peoples a century ago. Upon reflection, it's as ill-founded as the view that Galileo debunked, that the earth was the center of the universe. Religious people still take "be fruitful and multiply" as a commandment, which puts them at odds with secularists who argue that there are too many people in the world already and that we have a moral responsibility not to have children. The lonely, miserable position is that we, and those who will populate the earth for centuries to come, are the products of billions of years of evolution. If we think enough of ourselves to want to be represented in future generations, we must have children and raise them in a viable society. Since our society is the model we know, we're best off raising them to be like ourselves. Without children, it doesn't matter. From the point of view that it is an indirected process, evolution began spinning backwards a couple centuries ago. Standardized tests and the evidence of our eyes shows that we are getting dumber. There are evolutionary explanations for what we see as the collapse of Western civilization. Evolution being an impersonal force like gravity, it doesn't make sense to attempt to apply moral judgments to what we see or to try to hold off the changes we see coming. The most we as individual people can do is to hope to control the destiny of our own families. This video presents two brief timelines. They trace evolutionary change and human potential, the traits we regard as positive. The first timeline shows that, from the solipsistic human point of view, evolution and human potential tracked each other on an upward path until the Industrial Revolution. The second timeline traces the major milestones in the reversal of the upward trend in human fitness. I start with a brief recap of the significant innovations up through the Industrial Revolution. Agriculture was long established. Although it improved, the innovations that affected human evolution occurred in the spheres of trade, innovation, and advancing knowledge. At the beginning of the millennium, the Christian world was backward. Muslims had the momentum. The Vikings were making incursions all over northern Europe with their longboats. They invented the keel. Their second advantage was an amazing group solidarity fostered by high altruism. Returning crusaders brought with them a flood of new ideas. Windmills had been used in Persia and Arabic numerals in India for quite some time. The first universities were church-oriented, becoming secular over time. Intellectual life moved into centers of learning. The invention of the spinning wheel facilitated the establishment of large weaving operations in Belgium using English wool. Textiles became a major factor in international commerce. The Hanseatic League traded goods from Dublin to Riga. At the turn of the millennium, merchants had had to travel with their goods. As common people became literate, they used newly invented double-entry bookkeeping. Better records allowed large trading houses to operate on credit and to manage foreign subsidiaries. Cathedrals were the architectural wonders of the age. The Renaissance led to the recognition of individual artists, architects, and craftsmen. We know the geniuses by name: Sully, Palestrina, and Chaucer for three. The Black Plague killed a third of Europe's population. The common men who survived found their labor in great demand. Their status was somewhat improved. The European states were constantly at war. The English, with their longbows, made frequent incursions into France. The game changer was gunpowder. Cannons made old-fashioned castles obsolete. Then came long guns for individual soldiers. Europeans practiced war to the point that their militaries outclassed the whole world. The merchant class came into power, overtaking the nobility and the church. They congregated in towns, which became increasingly independent from the local nobility. Church authority was challenged when the Bible was translated into English. Martin Luther protested against the abuses of the church, and Henry VIII broke with Rome. Though done in the name of reforming Christianity, the creation of multiple interpretations of the faith led to the weakening of the faith itself. Portugal, on the periphery when river trade dominated commerce, had an intense interest in seagoing navigation. Their improved ships discovered Madeira, probed the coast of Africa, inspired the ships that Columbus used to discover America, and soon circumnavigated the globe. Dominating East Asia and the Americas, Portugal and Spain became world powers. The printing press revolutionized the distribution of knowledge. Literacy became more widespread, firing the Renaissance, or reawakening. Europeans dominated native peoples and established colonies all over the globe. The major agricultural development in this epoch was actually one of trade. The Columbian Exchange brought European crops and animals to the New World, and potatoes, corn, and tomatoes to Europe. England implemented the first welfare system, Henry VIII's Poor Laws. Science and technology took off with the Enlightenment. The telescope and the microscope supported developments in biology, physics, and chemistry. Water, wind, and then coal-fired steam engines provided energy to drive the Industrial Revolution. Mathematics advanced in support of Newton's development of the laws of physics and later Maxwell's laws of electricity. In short, human progress was extraordinary during the 8 centuries leading up to the Industrial Revolution. More and more, human advancement was in the realm of the intellect. The Enlightenment, inspired by philosophers, led to major discoveries in mathematics and science. The European branch of the human species especially pushed its own evolution by continually modifying its environment. Our European genome evolved rapidly and favorably up to the Industrial Revolution. We became less violent, more capable of living close together in cities. Literate and numerate people, that is to say smarter people, left more children. Europe's population was held in check by the Black Plague, ongoing warfare, and immigration to the New World. Social trends, however, became the most significant factor in holding populations down. These trends have accelerated to the point that populations are now declining, with the smartest people having the fewest children. The following series of slides traces the downward trajectory. By 1830, 1 Englishman in 6 was on welfare, the result of King Henry VIII's Poor Laws. Europe became urbanized. Since Roman times, cities have never reproduced themselves. On the farm, children work. They take care of parents in their old age. In the city, children are an expensive burden. Government pensions are more reliable for retirement. The countryside has long since been drained of talented kids to populate the cities. City dwellers often had no choice but to give their children to orphanages, where the death rates were extraordinarily high. Women and men alike worked in the dark, satanic mills, factories. However miserable their lives, women no longer depended so much on men. Darwinism found a ready audience. Belief in God, and hence the commandment to be fruitful and multiply, declined after the Enlightenment. With abundant fossil fuels, male muscle power was no longer as much in need. Home appliances lightened women's work at home. There were more clerical positions to be filled in business. Women went to work. Children were an impediment to work. Birth control became a rallying cry 100 years ago. The devices have become incredibly dependable. White babies are available for adoption only from fairly stupid and careless mothers. The best and brightest of 2 generations were sacrificed to world wars. Communist governments liquidated all whom they saw as threats, especially smart people. As physical strength was no longer needed, women came to compete equally with men in the workplace. The choice between career and family, career often won. Developed society became deracinated. Urban women had no extended family around to help with children. They faced the unpleasant task of giving up work or hiring expensive, indifferent childcare. Sexual practices traditionally seen as deviant have become accepted, even lionized. The disruption of traditional family structure has been especially damaging to North Asians. Their libidos had diminished over evolutionary time, promoting social harmony and leading them to devote resources to educating children rather than pursuing sex. However, without family and social pressure to marry, they just don't. The same trend is now visible in the West. Our electronic entertainments became more and more diverting, distracting us from flirting, courting, sex, marriage, and children. Marijuana and an unimaginable assortment of other drugs have become widely used, distracting people from human relationships. Women's liberation taught women that individual achievement was everything, and that marriage and children amounted to subjugation to the patriarchy. It was careers that mattered. As people of European stock stopped having babies and stopped believing in themselves, they opened the floodgates for the mass of immigrants from countries with substantially lower IQs. Altruism, which provided an evolutionary advantage in small homogeneous populations, has become damaging to those populations that still harbor it. They have universalized their altruism, applying it to radically different populations which exploit it and in no way reciprocate. Researcher Helmut Nyberg computes that the combination of immigration and the failure of the smarter members of Danish society to reproduce will bring the average intelligence down from 99 to 93 in a half century, undoing millennia of evolutionary progress. 2/3 of the population will be dumber than today's average Dane. Only half as many will be smart enough to meet today's criteria for entering college. Evolutionary psychologist Kevin MacDonald, among many others, believes the Jews have an unarticulated evolutionary strategy to weaken their Christian host societies by championing minorities, women's rights, gay rights, and so on. Ironically, the Jews themselves have been caught up even more than Christians in this anti-fertility campaign they champion. Relatively few commit to raising traditional families. When they do, it's often with non-Jewish partners and adoptive children. For all their fulminating about anti-Semitism, this 4-millennium-old tribe appears most likely to be done in by evolution itself. We must accept an evolutionary explanation for the bind that society finds itself in today. The aggregate of people pursuing their own perceived self-interest is making our society more dim-witted. Individual self-interest is leading to collective catastrophe. There are no societal solutions. They must be found at the level of the individual. First, a person must decide whether or not any of this matters. It is consistent with evolution to want your own progeny to succeed. Animals and tribal people do it instinctively. We have evolved to a point at which we can rationally consider our own reproductive choices. If you have decided you don't want to have children, we have to respect that decision. The most we can ask is that you recognize that you have no stake in the future of the planet and don't get involved in the questions that will affect that future. Pipe down about global warming. It doesn't affect you. Otherwise, acknowledge that the desire to procreate is outside the realm of logic. You may want to have children because your religion demands it. You may simply be fond of yourself and think that humanity will be better off being enriched by your genome. You have the right to this most personal decision whichever way you go. I want, and I have, children. To maximize the likelihood that they will pass my genome along, I'm doing the following. I live in a homogeneous country where there's a strong sense of family. My neighbors have a stake in my kids' success, and vice versa. I will homeschool them or educate them in private schools, teaching values consistent with my own. I will avoid the message-freighted public school textbooks and curriculum. I'll raise my kids with the expectation that they will create families of their own. I will teach my children not to apologize for who they are, and even to harbor the belief that they're a bit better than other people, more intelligent, more conscientious, better stewards of the earth and their culture. If not, why bother? I will teach them how to be self-reliant. This means being able to make a living, being equipped to live anywhere in the world under any circumstance, and not depending on government. The Earth's population is close to carrying capacity, which has been constantly elevated through the ingenuity of the smartest members of society. With fewer smart members of society, coupled with resource depletion, that carrying capacity itself is likely to diminish. We should be pleased that more and more people don't want to have children. It relieves the pressure on the planet and frees up resources for our children. We have to be wary, however. As the developed democracies enter a time of diminished resources, there will be enormous pressure to vote for benefits for the present generation at the expense of rising generations. As parents have a decreasing minority of the votes, it will be a struggle to find resources to raise and educate our children. We have to recognize that the people controlling institutions such as schools often don't have much stake in the future. The pansexuality and immigration that they advocate affects us, not them. We have to be on the defensive. Lastly, we have to find community. Our clans, tribes, and nations have been broken up. We need to remake them. We need to reestablish neighborhood schools, Boy Scouts, and other such institutions with people who share our values. We need to find ways to share our ideas, avoiding the propaganda of the mass media and circumventing censorship. Most important, we have to ensure that our children will meet and marry people who share our values. Evolution has been through bottlenecks before. Individuals who made it through that narrow window, like the Great Extinction of 65 million years ago, the Indians crossing the Bering Strait to the Americas or surviving the Black Death, form a founder generation. Their progeny, fewer in numbers, tougher in body and character, can take new evolutionary directions. I want my genome to be represented in the coming founder generation, rising from the ruins of demographic and economic collapse to make a new world.